Process of constitutional amendment. First, constitutional basis and philosophy. Article 368 of the Indian Constitution. Balance between rigidity and flexibility. Sovereign nature of the Indian Parliament. Basic structure, doctrine, limitation. Parliamentary supremacy with judicial review. Three-tier amendment procedure. Simple majority procedure. Applicable to specific provisions outside Article 368. Same as ordinary legislative process. Examples of provisions amended. Admission or establishment of new states. Formation of new states and alteration of areas. Abolition or creation of legislative council. Second schedule. Emoluments, allowances, quorum in parliament, salaries and allowances of MPs, rules of procedure in parliament, privileges of parliament, its members and committees. Use of English language in parliament. Special majority procedure. Majority of total membership of each house. Majority of not less than 2/3 of members present and voting. Required for amendment of fundamental rights. Directive principle of state policy. Most constitutional provisions. Examples: 24th Amendment Act 1971, 44th Amendment Act 1978, 86th Amendment Act 2002, Right to Education. Special majority with state ratification. Special majority of Parliament plus consent of half of the state legislature required for amendment of federal provisions. Election of President. Extent of executive power of Union States. Supreme Court and High Courts. Distribution of legislative powers. Representation of states in Parliament. 7th Schedule. Article 368 itself. Examples: 7th Amendment Act 1956, 61st Amendment Act 1989. Detailed amendment process. Initiation of amendment. Bill can be introduced in either house of parliament. No prior permission from president required. Minister or private member can introduce. Must be passed by each house separately. Parliamentary procedure. First reading, introduction and publication. Second reading, discussion and clause by clause consideration. Committee stage if referred. Third reading, final discussion and voting. Requirement of a special majority where applicable. State legislature role only in case of federal provisions amendment. Simple majority of state legislature required. No time limit for state ratification. Half of total seat must ratify. Presidential assent. Mandatory for all constitutional amendments. President cannot withhold assent. 24th Amendment made assent compulsory. Bill becomes act after presidential assent. Judicial interpretation and landmark cases. Shankari Prasad vs. Union of India 1951. Parliament's power to amend fundamental rights upheld Article 13 not applicable to constitutional amendments. Golak Nath vs. State of Punjab 1967. Fundamental rights cannot be amended. Reverse Shankari Prasad judgment. Keshavanand Bharti vs. State of Kerala 1973. Basic structure doctrine propounded. Parliament can amend but not destroy basic structure. Judiciary as ultimate interpreter. Minerva Mills vs. Union of India 1980. Confirmed basic structure doctrine. Struck down parts of 42nd Amendment. Harmony between fundamental rights and DPSP essential. Major constitutional amendments. Significant amendment and their impact. First Amendment 1951 added 9th schedule. Land reform laws protected from judicial review. Added reasonable restrictions to fundamental rights. 7th Amendment 1953 Organization of States. Abolition of ABCD states. Reduction of Union territories. 24th Amendment 1971. Parliament's power to amend any part of Constitution made presidential assent compulsory. Response to Golak Nath case. 42nd Amendment 1976. Most comprehensive amendment. Added words socialist, secular to preamble. Added fundamental duties. Extended Parliament's term during emergency period. 44th Amendment 1978. Restored balance after emergency. Made judicial review more effective. Protected fundamental rights better. Limited emergency powers. 73rd and 74th Amendment 1992. Constitutional status to Panchayati Raj institutions. Constitutional status to urban local bodies. Added 11th and 12th schedules. Basic structure doctrines and its elements. Identified basic features. Supremacy of Constitution. Republican and democratic form of government. Secular character of Constitution. Separation of powers between legislature, executive, judiciary. Federal character of Constitution. Unity and integrity of nation. Welfare state. Judicial review, freedom and dignity of individual. Parliamentary system, rule of law. Harmony between fundamental rights and DPSP. Free and fair elections. Contemporary issues and challenges. Judicial activism versus parliamentary sovereignty. Tussle between judiciary and legislature. Judicial review of constitutional amendments. Basic structures as limitation. Democratic legitimacy questions. Procedural challenges. Time consuming processes for federal amendments. Political consensus difficulties, regional party influences, coalition politics impact, emerging debates, need for more flexible amendment processes, protection of federal principles, balancing fundamental rights and social reforms, accommodating new constitutional values, comparative perspectives, global amendment procedures, rigid versus flexible constitution, role of referendums in adult democracy, subnational unit participation, judicial review and amendment process, unique features of Indian process, combination of flexibility and rigidity, no role for direct public participation, judicial interpretation significance, evolutionary nature of amendment process, statistical overview, amendment trends, total amendment passed 105 plus as of 2023, average amendment per year 1.4, most amendments in a year 5 1976, longest gap between amendments 4 years, high success rate of amendment bills, few amendments struck down by judiciary, political consensus on most amendments, incremental change approach. The constitutional amendment process in India represents a carefully crafted mechanism that allows for constitutional evolution while protecting its basic structure. It reflects the maturity of Indian democracy and the wisdom of the constitution makers in creating a living document that can adapt to changing needs while preserving its fundamental values. That's it for this topic.